She got her dad's long legs. I don't do technical stuff either, so Karen is my techie. I first want to thank her so much for having me come and for having the pleasure of staying in her home and getting to know her and her mom and get to spend some time with her. It's been a wonderful, wonderful couple of days. Oh, I love that face. That's its determined look. I've written a long speech. I'll read some of it. But first, I just want to express my gratitude to all of you who have come quite a ways to be here, to hear us talk, to meet us, to hear our story, because now it'll be upon you. Once we've given our testament, our story, to tell that same story to hundreds of others. We're all about the same age in here, close, give or take 10 years up or down, right? I think Shalise is the youngest one here. It is our responsibility to be doing this work. And Shalise is old enough to be responsible to be doing this work. We can't leave it for anybody else. I wanted to talk a little bit about Lavoy, and I wanted to share a couple of his journal entries so you could get a look into his mind. And they're short. 4/12/2012. This is Easter Sunday. It has been a wonderful weekend. We've rounded up Dad's cows and branded them. All of my family and a lot of the extended family were there. It was really rewarding to ride with my dad, Guy, my daughters, Tian and Catrielle, nieces and nephews. My daughters carry their own weight. They are becoming good riders and have good judgment in working livestock. My heart is filled with joy and gratitude as I watch them run their horses through the brush and the trees cutting cows. Danielle Catrielle with her dark hair, and Tian with her blonde hair flowing behind her. As a father, I am blessed beyond measure. After branding, Jeanette and I rode around the old ranch house, and I pointed out some of the old points of the homestead. As we rode around, we watched all of the little families and their little children doing the Easter egg hunt. Mom and Dad's posterity has grown greatly. The joy and happiness as all of the little families interacted and worked together was a wonder to see. So it just kind of gives you a glimpse into his mind about how he felt about his family, about his parents, about his brothers and sisters, about us. And as I read through his journal, it's a good thing he wrote a journal because it brings it all back very vivid for me. It's 3/2012. This is the start of a new journal in the year 2012. My name is Lavoy Fincum, and I'm 51 years old. I'm the father of 12 children, and my wife is Jeanette Finicum. The world I grew up in is rapidly changing. I was born in this choice land of the United States of America. This has been a choice land and a noble country. In the more than 230 years of her existence, this country has been the standard of freedom throughout the world. I have lived to see her reach a pinnacle of wealth that has never been known in the history of the world. God raised up noble men who laid the foundations of a free government. The Constitution which they laid down was inspired of heaven for the protection of man's God-given liberties. For almost 100 years, evil and conspiring men have sought to destroy those liberties for their own power and gain. With sweet words of honey laced with poison, they have lied to us. Professing care and concern for the working man and the downtrodden, they have enacted laws and breached those safeguards erected by our Constitution. The politicians violate their oath to protect and defend the Constitution. He wrote that in 2012. He had already begun his process of, most of our kids at this point were married. I think we were down to 2 in the home. And so my husband was never a man to sit idle. He was always actively engaged in something, and his mind was always going, and he always had his face in 2 or 3 books at one time. But our focus was starting to switch, right? As you raise your kids, you have this stage and this stage, and here we are, we were becoming grandparents, and all of our kids were leaving the home, and he was starting to switch his energies. And his eyes were being opened. I think, we had cable back then. I think we had cable back then. We might not have had cable back then. But he had listened to a lot of Glenn Beck. I know he had Sirius XM in the car. And so he would listen to Glenn Beck. Mark Levin was his absolute favorite. And he became more aware of what was going on around us because we didn't really have cable in the house and we weren't listening to news. And so, out in cane beds, all we did was kids and cows. And his mind started opening up. And things started to change. And I remember he was up in Salt Lake at a convention, and the Clive and Bundy thing was going on, and we knew nothing about the Bundys. We didn't know them. But he decided he needed to know them, and he needed to know what was going on. So he left his work convention, and he drove all the way from Salt Lake to Bunkerville, and met him that night. Of course, Clive, as warm and friendly as he is, welcomed him right in. Invited him to come back the next day with his horse. And so when my husband came home, he says, I'm going over to Bunkerville tomorrow, and I'll be riding with Clive. And I went, okay. I had no idea about Clive either. I had no idea what was going on. We did not have television. We had no news. We didn't know what was going on. He was the first rider on site, unarmed. That was something I wanted to make perfectly clear. The riders were unarmed. Those cowboys had no guns. Some of the people around them had guns. It was one of the hardest days, searching for answers on the internet, speaking to a friend who was there by cell phone and then having the cell phones killed, no communication going out. In a lot of ways, it was much harder for us that day than it was when he went up to Oregon. Because he came home safe. We had the misconception that he was going to be okay up there in Oregon too. Why did he go to Oregon? He went there to join in a peaceful demonstration, a march, and to visit Mrs. Hammond and Mr. Hammond to show his support for her and his son, for her husband and her son, who were being imprisoned for a crime that they'd already served time for. He considered him his neighbor. He didn't look at boundaries or state lines. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't help you. You're no longer a neighbor. You're on the other side of the line. He didn't look at it like that. There were people that said, go home. What are you doing, you interloper? What are you doing here? You don't belong in Oregon. This is the United States of America. We all belong in this same country. And we do have a concern in what's happening in one state to the other. We should be concerned. They went up there to deliver flowers and to walk down the street with their signs. And when he arrived there the next morning, because they had to drive all night, something was wrong with the truck, they had to get a rental truck. And so they arrived just in time for the parade or the walk down Main Street. And Ammon pulled a few of the men aside and said, "This is what I had in mind. Until that point, my husband knew nothing." He was told that he wanted to continue the peaceful demonstration, the redress of grievances 35 miles outside of Burns. 35 miles away from the town or any town. And Lavoy agreed, and so he went with the rest of them out there. George Bernard Shaw's definition of socialism or collective control, and I quote, "Socialism, reduced to its simplest legal and practical expression, means the complete discarding of the institution of private property by transforming it into public property and the division of the resultant income equally given among the entire population," end quote. What do we call all those lands that our presidents keep signing into monuments? What is it called? Public property. They have been successful over these 100 years of changing the definition of private property, or what we know or what we knew as private property, to where they are now calling it public property. We can't allow them to do that. They're stealing the lands in the West from the states, from the individuals who own that have actual property title to either the water, or the minerals, or the grazing rights. I know it's hard to understand out here when you don't have the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, here in the East. But we hope that as we continue to move around and talk about it, that we can make more people aware of the plight that we're under, how these loggers, miners, ranchers, and farmers are being systematically stripped of their livelihood, of their way of life, and of their property. And because it's just one logger here, or one rancher here, or one farmer over here, or Joe Robertson up north in Montana who had a pond, 77 years old, in jail for having a pond of water on his private property. I didn't even know about Joe Robertson until I was out speaking after Lavoy was murdered. I met him myself in Montana, and I couldn't believe it. I was the mother that stayed home, raised all the kids, and was busy with diapers, dishes, and food, and laundry, and talk about having your eyes opened to what is out there. Travel around and hear the hundreds of stories of people that their whole lives are being destroyed. First time?
I'm a rancher in northern Arizona, and I'm here to support the Hammonds. There's been a lot of words that have been said here. And I see some eyes sort of kind of glaze over a little bit. Maybe I can bring it down to a little more emotional level or a human level. Each one of you here today are important. Individually, each one of you are important. Not collectively, we're talking about you as an individual, as a human being. The Hammond family are human beings. They're individuals. They have loved ones. They have children, grandchildren. This is real. This affects real lives. And so that's why we're here today. And if our federal government would have abided by the Constitution, the supreme law of the land, we would have never gotten here. And so let it just kind of come to a simple level of why this is so bad at the federal level. Our founding fathers had escaped from tyranny. They believed in freedom. And so when they set up our government, they separated the powers, didn't they? And we all know what they are: executive, legislative, and judicial branches. We know those three branches of power. Well, what has happened to 1/3 of our land mass? Do you know the federal government owns and controls 1/3 of this nation? Let me put that in perspective. You need to put in the country of Germany, and put in France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, and those throw in Great Britain too. And then you're getting about the same land mass as what the federal government says that they own and control. And they say they have complete legislative power whatsoever. They've taken it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has upheld it. Yes, they have complete power whatsoever over 1/3 of this nation. Now, let me explain it simply as I can, as I try to stumble over my words here, is that for myself as a rancher, my ranch is Northern Arizona, a bureaucrat behind the desk can write a statute regarding me, my ranch. It has the force and effect of law. This bureaucrat is not accountable to me. We have not elected him there. Now, if I get contrary to that statute, there's a federal ranger with a gun that can enforce that. And if it goes from there, I am brought into a federal court. Neither the law enforcement, the federal ranger, has been elected by us, the people here. They are not under the power of the recall. Neither the bureaucrat that wrote the statute, neither the law enforcement that enforces it, and now I am hauled into a federal court. All three branches of power under one head with no representation. Did we not, as Americans, face this issue some 200 years ago? Don't we remember that phrase? Taxation without representation. So now here we are, control without representation. 1/3 of our land mass. It's an empire within our own country. Unaccountable, unelected. The real power is in the bureaucracies. And so that's kind of the simple part of it. You know, it's about family. It's about my family. It's about the Hammond family. I've spoken to many ranchers in Utah, in Nevada, in Arizona. They are all feeling the same thing. They're all feeling this oppression that's coming down upon them. Their livelihood is threatened, being taken away. Their ranches are being regulated out of business. And so this is real. These families are real. They're not trying to cause problems. They're food producers. They help make our country self-reliant, free, independent. Do you realize that you have to go back to about 1955 to get as low as the motherhead count as we have right now in the United States? Have any of you ate a steak lately? Do you know the price of that? That goes way up. You know, if we had more demand, if we had more production, we would ship out more, we would feed more, we would be self-reliant as a country. These are good people. They produce, they add to our country. They do not take it away. I want to say one more thing about here, what we're doing. Every one of you that says this is an occupation until their demands are met, you misunderstand. We're not making demands. We're not making demands. We're here to work. These buildings here belong to Harney County. These are Harney County public lands, the state of Oregon. This is theirs. This is their land. This is their state. It's theirs. And so we've come here to work. We've not come here to sit as children and stamp our feet and demand that certain things are met. We're going to go to work. We're going to try to help restore these ranchers that have lost their ranches back to them. We're going to legally go to the records. We're going to search out these ranchers. Over 100 ranchers have lost their ranches here in this very area, in this very county, have been pushed off. We would like to see them return to their ranches, ranch again, log again, live again as free people. And so we're here to try to help that happen. We're going to go to work. We're not going to just sit down here and twiddle our thumbs. We've got a lot to do, and I appreciate you being here. I'm just a simple hick, and doing the best I can. I love this country. I love my kids. I love my wife. I love my family. And if we lose freedom, what shall they do? I want my children to experience real freedom, breathe freedom. And thank you.
played that one 7-minute clip of my husband and point by point that he was trying to make, and I could have a whole nother speech prepared on each separate point from my own experiences and my own witness in this last year alone. In Baltimore, the mayor said, and I think there's someone here from Baltimore, we talked about it,
Yep.
Let it burn, give them space. Ferguson governor said, give them some space, and did not apply any support or help to the businesses or to the neighborhood for 48 hours. The New York mayor, de Blasio, told the police to stand down and to give them some time to blow off steam. The Dakota Access Pipeline protest, months of protesting, destroying property, even so much as letting off a bomb on a bridge. All of those protests that I've just mentioned were not peaceful. They destroyed personal property and they harmed others. Yet they were allowed to continue for months, some of them. I wonder, is it because they were politically correct? None, and I repeat, none of this behavior went on at Malheur. None. They were peaceful men. Their weapon was those mics in front of them. They wanted their message to be heard. They wanted to represent a peaceful men of God, and they did. They wanted to go to work, like he said. He wasn't, and was not a lazy man, so he didn't believe on just sitting around doing nothing. None of them did. They weren't there to throw a temper tantrum. I'm going to read a lot of this because there's some statements I don't want to be misquoted. I've had that experience too, just lately. I believe there are many who are responsible for the negative outcome of this peaceful demonstration. Sheriff David Ward, for relinquishing his authority to the FBI, instead of allowing them some time to exercise their First Amendment right to free speech and peacefully demonstrate as others throughout the country have been allowed to do. Judge Grasty, for refusing to hear or take into consideration the redress for grievances Ammon personally filed months before this ever occurred. Governor Kate Brown, for her letter dated January 20th, 2016, to the Attorney General Loretta Lynch and FBI Director James Comey 6 days before they murdered my husband, which says, quote, I must insist on a swift resolution to this matter. I request that you instruct your agencies to end the unlawful occupation of the Malheur National Wild Refuge as quickly as possible, naming them as radicals and criminals, claiming they were harassing law enforcement and their family members, all of which were not true. Senator Wyden, who said to KOIN 6 News, quote, this should have ended a long time ago. This was a situation where the virus was spreading and actions need to be taken, end quote. To the FBI and Oregon State Police for escalating things within the town of Burns, inciting fear in the hearts and minds of its citizens by walking around town, tacked out and armed to the hilt, and for the murder of my husband. I believe Senator Wyden was right. Their message was spreading, and people could resonate with the message of freedom, of liberty, of personal property rights, all of which are guaranteed in our Constitution, the law of this land. Officials investigating the death of my husband, Lavoy, referred to the killing as a routine traffic stop. However, the FBI video shows this was not a typical traffic stop. It was a planned ambush involving a roadblock on a blind, curved road along a long stretch of highway, a dead man's blockade, a kill stop, which is illegal. Nothing routine about it. It was planned days in advance and executed by an elite kill team and sanctioned by the White House. The FBI said Finicum was shot after reaching for a gun, that the shooting which resulted in Lavoy's death was justified. This allegation and finding is in dispute. The FBI aerial video was of poor quality, edited, and provided no audio. Our family asserts that he was shot with both hands up and that he did not reach for a gun, but that he reacted in response to pain either inflicted by a rubber bullet, which they were shooting, or from being tased, which they did have, or from his arms dropping from just losing his balance and walking in 3.5 foot of snow. And we were just there in Oregon. We were just there, and a lot of my kids went back to that site. And they could not walk in that snow, let alone run, as my husband was, with his hands in the air. I can hardly believe that a team of qualified law officers could look at the facts in this case and say that no criminal laws were violated by the authorities. The FBI lying and removing evidence is just one example in this case thus far. Many have stated that the video proves a set-up assassination. How could they have reached this decision in the face of evidence that clearly shows intent to kill my husband? Many people, including my lawyers, have tried to prepare me to be strong, to accept all of this with peace. But I don't think that anything could prepare me to accept what is so clearly a finding that challenges the Constitution that my husband died defending. I know that under the Constitution, the men who shot my husband to death while he was surrendering are entitled to due process of law. But they are not entitled to walk away free and not have to face the same legal process that is a barrier to you and me. They shot my husband, left him lying in the snowbank. No medical assistance, no charges, no arraignment, no preliminary hearing, no indictment, no warrant, no trial by a jury where he too would have been found innocent. He had no due process. Our family is really grateful for the outcome of the Oregon Federal District Court jury finding all of the defendants in the first trial not guilty of all charges. We are grateful that some have been able to return to their families. We are praying for all who continue to be incarcerated unjustly for their immediate release. We hope for the same outcome for the next 7, now on trial in Oregon, and for those awaiting trial in Nevada. The courts in Oregon first tried those who they considered were the leaders, right? Lavoy being the media spokesperson for that group, if his right to life, due process, and fair trial would not have been taken from him, he too would have been tried in the first group of leaders, and he too would have been acquitted by the jury and would have returned home to his family a free man. Lavoy's inalienable right to life was robbed from him merely for doing that which our nation's rule of law safeguards for its citizens, which is the right to peacefully assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances, and for merely using his words to educate others on constitutional principles. I have a lot of things going on in my life this year. Going around speaking about this because I didn't do the work that Lavoy did. I never would have dreamed that we would be doing this. I never would have dreamed that Lavoy would be dead. And sometimes it's really difficult for me to think that a whole year has gone by because it's gone by so fast. Because we have been so busy. to be out here. Because I can't be home very long, you know, because it's hard still. So this is better. It's everywhere, you know. But I have experienced so much. Spoken many places and met so many wonderful people across this country. And one of those places was Delta, Colorado. And I think it was, I'm trying to remember when, let's see if there's a date on this. I remember now, first time I went there was the weekend right after the 4th of July. But unbeknownst to me and my niece and my daughter and my grandsons that were with me, the week before, because this is dated June 28th, the FBI and the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, and Oregon officials went to the little town of Delta to talk with the chief of police and the sheriff department and the city council, and they released this memo. Please be advised that the Delta PD was informed that there will be a group of sovereign citizens meeting at the Fireside Restaurant. They will be there doing a fundraiser for the sovereign citizens who was shot and killed in the Oregon standoff. It has been reported that among the people attending will be the sovereign citizen's wife who was shot and killed, and signed by the city manager. And when it was brought to my attention that people were going in before meetings, before groups like this, I went, what? What does a sovereign citizen mean? I had no idea. Why is the FBI going to little groups that I'm speaking to? I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not saying anything wrong. I'm not inciting violence. I'm not encouraging anybody to do anything outside of the law. How dare they? You know, and then my pride and I get angry, and how dare they stop me? How dare they try to intimidate me? And I thought to myself, you know, I know I'm strong and I know I'm stubborn, but you have to be careful sometimes when you use that, when that stubbornness, when that pride. I don't want to do anything that doesn't allow the Spirit of God to be with me to help direct me in the things that I'm doing for me and my family. When you're prideful, you can't have that Spirit with you. But I was getting mad, as my husband would say. I was determined not to let them intimidate me from speaking my mind, no matter what was on my mind. As long as I was doing it lawfully, I felt I had every right to speak out. So I asked Barb, I said, please, set up another meeting in Delta. I'm going back. But in the meantime, I had to figure out, what is a sovereign citizen and what are they saying about me? What is it that they're trying to threaten this town with? You know, why are they seeing the sheriff? Why are they warning citizens? What is it that I'm doing? Why this label? And here's the definition from their own website, and I paraphrased it into a paragraph because it's 4 pages long. The FBI considers sovereign citizens extremists, a domestic terrorist movement, an anti-government group, is closely related to the lands movement. Sovereign citizens do not represent an anarchist group, nor are they a militia, although they sometimes use or buy illegal weapons, refer to themselves as constitutionalists. Many believe that only white men have rights. They believe that the ratification of the 13th and 19th Amendment are unconstitutional, meaning women never gained suffrage. and any election in which women have voted is null and void. I found that one to be interesting. Sovereign citizens don't pay their taxes, use fake currency, passports, license plates, or driver's licenses. They don't recognize government authority, courts, or law enforcement. Sovereign citizens commit murder and physical assault. They threaten judges and law enforcement, and they engineer various white-collar scams. This type of behavior is associated with rural, small-town whites in the American West.